Welcome to the Pindown, your Detroit Pistons podcast. I'm your host, Wes Davenport from Motor City Hoops and Detroit Bad Boys.
And I'm Blake Silverman, writer for Detroit Bad Boys, covering everything from the Pistons to the NBA draft and the Motor City Cruise.
And we got a special guest today. We couldn't be more excited to be joined by one of the original Pistons podcasting voices. I don't know about you, Blake, but our guy here, Laz Jackson from Detroit Bad Boys. This was like the first Pistons podcast I started listening to regularly. So we got an OG here. We're excited. Thank you so much for joining us, Laz.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you, Wes, and thank you, Blake, for having me, even if I did have to shame Wes in inviting me.
Well, look,
I had to laugh at that when I was listening to the episode of the Pistons Pulse. Didn't hear that coming. We were just like, Laz, we're not sure if we can ever get you. You know, you're a busy guy, but we're happy that you wanted to come on. So we should have extended the invite sooner. That's on.
No, it's all in good fun.
I was going to say, I think on Twitter, it still says you are the dean, right, of Pistons Twitter. I don't know where that came from, but as someone that is working,
that was one of the Pistons Twitter contests like 3-4 years ago now. At this point,
seriously,
yeah.
Oh,
is that the
was
bracket?
That like the voting ones? The bracket, right?
Yeah.
There we go.
Nice. Well, I was going to say I work in the academic side of things, and so if you are the dean, I'm reporting to you. So I say that to say, when you say on the podcast, I want to show up on the Pistons, the Pindown, when you say that on the Pistons Pulse, it happens. Your word goes.
Appreciate it.
Well, let's just dive right in because plenty of Pistons news this week, obviously with the trade deadline, with a little bit of all-star stuff with Cade Cunningham just being announced that he's going to be in the three-point contest. And guys, we are recording before that 76ers game. We figured that would be all right since there was so much that had already happened. But Laz, just wanted to open up with your general thoughts and reactions to what the Pistons were able to accomplish here at the trade deadline.
Yeah, to tie this into DBB a little bit, we had the DBB on 3 about the trade deadline, and it seemed like the reactions were all pretty in line with one another. Everybody kind of expects that Schroeder will take over Marcus Sasser's minutes, be effective in that role, hopefully play better than he did in Golden State, but they're going to run a different offensive system than they did in Golden State, and he had success in Brooklyn running a lot of pick and roll, so he should be fine. Not a lot much else for Trajan to do. I don't know if you saw the press conference that Trajan gave after the trade deadline earlier today, but he basically said, like, yeah, we didn't expect to be in this position, and so we didn't it was like this is what we were going to do, as opposed to like trying to make a home run swing for a guy like Ingram or Zach LaVine, 2 guys who actually were traded at the deadline, to my surprise. It's a very noisy deadline, so I was glad the Pistons got to be a part of it.
Yeah, one of my main takeaways from Trajan's press conference today is like it seemed like it was never the plan to I think the words that were used and whoever asked the question and Trajan's response were push the chips in. Like Trajan said that they had those conversations, but it seemed like that was never really an option. And I think as fans and just people who talk about this team like every day, we understood that, but where this team is in the standings and like competing for a play-in, a playoff spot, you're like, I don't know, are they like changing their strategy a little bit? And there were some reports that came out that they were thinking that way, which Trajan said they were, but at the end of the day, it seemed like the plan was see this thing through, use your cap space to bring in some assets. I mean, maybe they wanted more, but depending what was on the table and get a player that can help this team out right now in Dennis Schroeder. And it seemed like Trajan was pretty high on Lindy Waters too. So without giving up much. So I think overall, just staying true to what they wanted to do was makes sense to me. And I think overall was a success when you consider what they gave up, which is nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I wanted to ask you guys. So you brought up the difference, right, between what Schroeder was in Brooklyn and what he was with the Golden State Warriors. Just kind of wanted to get your guys' vibe. why maybe that was. So I can just read off the stats, right? So actually it's incredibly even. All right. So in 23 games with the Nets, he averaged about 18 points per game, 6.5 assists, 3 rebounds, and slash 45, 39, 89 on, and he was attempting 3.5 free throw attempts a night. Really good. Gets to Golden State in 24 games. It's 10.5 points, 4.5 assists, 2.3 rebounds. And then he slashed 38, 32, and 74, only 1.6 free throw attempts per game. So like, what happened there? Why was there such an incredible drop off?
I think part of it is definitely due to the fact that in Brooklyn, he was kind of the only guy. Well, he was one of their primary guys. In Golden State, right? He's behind Steph Curry and Draymond Green and Kuminga at times when Kuminga was healthy. And so I can see how it was easy for him to not get comfortable especially since he's a guy used to having the ball in his hands a lot, which is the role that he's hopefully going to play for Detroit when Cade is off the floor. So that is mostly what I attribute it to. I don't know, I didn't look up the splits between pull up versus catch and shoot threes, but my memory is that he's probably a better catch and shoot 3-point shooter. And I think he'll get fewer of those looks, but he'll be able to attack the basket a little bit more, and that'll help. The other thing is, right, he'll probably have a better pick and roll partner than he had in Golden State. I like Trace Jackson Davis, but I don't know if that's the most extreme lob threat I've ever seen in my life.
No.
Defenses are really paying attention. They're trying to take away Trace Jackson Davis, and so if he gets any minutes with Duren or in Stu sets really good screens, I think those will both be better pairings and be more effective for him in the pick and roll as well.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear JB talk before the game. I mean, that press conference is probably happening now as we're recording Friday night before the Pistons play the Sixers. I think Omari might have asked Trajan how he sees Schroeder fitting into the rotation, and Trajan was pretty much more of a JB question, but he sees him as a guy that can fill in where they need, play next to Cade, also run the second unit himself, and mention he sees him as potentially a big piece for this team, which I see too. Schroeder's been that way in his various stops around the league, and I just think he had so much runway with Brooklyn because of their situation right now. He was kind of a fantasy basketball all-star for a few weeks there, and that ended immediately when he got sent to Golden State. And yeah, just whirlwind of a season for him after that strong start. So I think I was worried when I found out he was coming to the Pistons that he was his mind is going everywhere after being sent to 3 or 4 teams in the matter of a day, and then you bring in being traded earlier. But it seems he's excited for the opportunity. Obviously it's not the Pistons' fault what happened. He was just bounced around and found a good situation with a team that's competing for a playoff spot. So overall, I'm excited to see how he fits in, and that Trajan was able to address this big need that was glaring whenever you watch the Pistons play.
Yeah, and something I've been thinking about as I was doing a little bit of prep for the podcast, and then also listening to that press conference today, was just how good of a Jaden Ivey impression is Dennis Schroeder able to make? So when Langdon leaves the door open, right, for what his role is going to be, I had immediately, when that trade came through, I just immediately thought, okay, he's going to take those Marcus Sasser backup point guard minutes, right? And that would kind of be the end of it. But is there maybe more meat on that bone, do you guys think? If he really does truly get back to who he was in Brooklyn, which is a guy who can operate a lot of pick and rolls with the ball in his hands, be a threat, honestly, pretty good shooter, right? Pretty good catch and shoot shooter. He was up at 39%, though, on fairly low volume. If he can maybe even get to 90% of that in Detroit, is there an argument to push him up into that second guard role next to Cade Cunningham, even opening nights, but surely to close games?
I don't know. I really like the chemistry the current starting lineup has shown. I don't really want to mess with that too much. And I also wonder about the rotation questions of If you start the game with both of them together, does that mean like one guy's playing 12 full minutes for the entire like first quarter? How do you want to stagger that? I think it's just easier for continuity and for roster balance to keep Schroeder in the sixth man role that I think he can be effective in. And Sasser wasn't the sixth man, like Beasley's the sixth man, but like as the first or second guard off the bench, I think that's the role that we should see Schroeder in.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do think it's a good option though. Like if THJ has to miss a couple games for whatever reason, like it's a good option specifically because like Cade can, he's going to get his touches no matter what, but like he can play a little bit more off the ball if he has a more on ball creator playing next to him. So I like the flexibility there, but yeah, I think you'd want him to sort of just step into like what Sasser has been doing since Jaden Ivey went out. And then, I mean, we can talk about what it means for Marcus Sasser. Like, is he going to be playing more in a role that's better suited for him, or does he like completely fall out of the rotation? It's probably a little bit like those minutes are going to at least go down, but I at least like the aspect of the trade that Sasser is not going to have too much on his plate, which I felt like has been the case since Ivy went down.
All right, yeah, before we get into oh, sorry, go ahead.
I definitely agree that Sasser's been like a little overstretched. He had a pretty nice game against Atlanta? No, against Dallas. No. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep. And you would hope that he contributes at that level on a more consistent basis, and that just kind of hasn't been the case. And so I think there's a possibility that he he eats into some of the Beasley minutes, or maybe he eats into like a little bit of the Hardaway minutes where they get Beasley in and then extend both of those guys out. So you're playing like Schroeder, Sasser, and Beasley like all at the same time maybe. So I don't think Sasser is completely gone from the rotation, but I do think his impact, or I do think his role is probably going to go down.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I almost wonder if there's a little bit of kind of push and pull between Sasser now and Ron Holland in a way, because of how the Pistons have been playing their guards up into that small forward spot occasionally off the bench. Like if one of those two gets hot, right, I wonder if that's just the guy that's going to play that night versus, well, not versus, but that can go back and forth either way, just kind of depending on, like I said, the hot hand. Before we get into looking, to the rest of the season, how maybe this impacts the Pistons, hopefully playoff, but more likely play in push, I want to get to what I'm sure everybody's been waiting for. Let's get some reactions to Lindy Waters. What do you think, Glass?
So I actually kind of like Lindy Waters. I've always kind of liked Lindy Waters since his OKC days. I was not surprised, but I was pleasantly surprised that Trajan was also I like Lindy Waters. I think he's the guy that impressed me. It's okay, maybe this guy isn't just a throw in. He's a very streaky shooter, but if he gets hot, I really like his shot. So as a 60-55% of Hardaway Jr.-ish type of player, I think there's a role for that type of player on this team if he's making shots. That has to be the key, right? He's got to be getting shots up and he's got to be making them at a really good rate. I think if he was a little bit taller, he might take over Simone's role. Simone has been not hitting shots off the bench, and that's kind of been an issue for this bench unit. And so it would be nice to have another non-Beasley option in mostly bench lineups to get some offense going. I do think they can do some of the same movement shooting sets that they do with Beasley with Waters. I think, and that's something that you see them lean on a lot when Cade is not on the floor. I wonder if with the Schroeder addition, they still feel like they have to do that. But yeah, so those are my Lindy Waters thoughts. I like him. We'll see if he makes shots or not, and that's really the big question with him.
When I remember my first Lindy Waters impression, and when I was also I kind of like this guy, was 2 seasons ago in March when everyone was shut down. It was the game when Killian Hayes like scored 25 points in OKC and Lindy Waters like had a nice game too on the other. It was like one of the best Killian Hayes games of his career, and we just went another podcast episode with mentioning Killian Hayes somehow in some way. But yeah, I like him too. Like honestly, I don't think that he'll have a huge role. Like he might even be out of the rotation, but the team waived Wendell Moore. I kind of see Waters. They're not the exact type of player, but I see them being used similarly. Like when you need them, when there's foul trouble, when there's injuries, like a guy you go to and hope can step up. And I like him as a shooter as well. I think he can knock down shots. And yeah, I was super interested to hear that Trajan has been like following him for a while and liked him and seemed like he was a guy that he was more than happy to take on. Before we move on from Lindy Waters, though, I have to ask you guys if you've seen the famous Lindy Waters TikTok.
No.
Oh,
I'm an old man, Blake. I'm
just as old as Wes.
I have to send this to you guys. So it's one of those like videos where people are just like going out on the street in some like busy town and like interviewing people. And this guy like goes up to this younger couple, like it looked like they were college age or something like that. And the guy has his like arm around his girlfriend, and the guy interviewing them asked like, would you have like take a hall pass from your girlfriend or whatever? And the guy just instantly says no, like straight up says no. Then he asks the girl the same question and she's like, yes. And then she's asked like, who would you use your hall pass with? And she says Lindy Waters the third. I'm gonna send you guys this video, but it is so funny. It's like there had to be something deeper to it for her to bring out Lindy Waters.
It's like his reaction is like, you know, that he knew that like her hall pass was Lindy Waters, and he's like so mad. Okay, yeah, I want to see this.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. The guy's like, I don't even know who that is.
I really thought this was going to be like the what was that, like the Klay Thompson man on the street interview, just like talking about scaffolding, right? That's where I thought you were going with this.
Or Troy Weaver talking about the Heat in Vegas.
Yeah,
I almost wish I didn't say anything and just sent it to you guys, because like when you watch the video, like you would just not be expecting this girl to say Lindy Waters as you watch like the minute before or whatever it is.
I mean, props to that girl. She's got to be a real big NBA fan to pull a backup, like a bench warmer, basically off some random. Like, yeah, the one. That's the one. Going back to the basketball.
Sorry.
How did you get Killian Hayes and a TikTok video into this, like the first 20 minutes of this episode, Blake?
Hey man, when Lindy Waters becomes a Piston, those are like the two things that stick out to me.
Fair enough. I was just gonna say on the topic of the basketball side of things, with how things went last year with the spacing on the roster, anytime the Pistons are able to grab just a throw-in guy, and sure, maybe it's not a true throw-in, right? Langdon likes him, followed him for a while, but practically speaking, this was just kind of an additional player that they were able to get that they're kind of interested in. So it's a flyer. He can shoot the basketball, 36% from three. And yeah, he's streaky, but he's also been a volume shooter when he plays minutes. So like, I will never turn that down after what we watched last year. Just add as many shooters to this roster as possible. That sounds fantastic to me. I'm in. That's great. Looking forward though now.
Blake, what's your favorite Wendell Moore Jr. moment?
Ooh.
Man, props to Wendell Moore, but I don't know if there's anything that's sticking out to me. But hey,
didn't he have a real nice game against like the Timberwolves or something earlier this year?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, we have to go back and watch the tape. Piston for life, though.
That and like I think he started the first non-JI game, or like the first, yeah. And so it's like, okay, like maybe there's some there that I wasn't expecting, and there wasn't as much there. So that's fine. But yeah, Godspeed, Wendell Moore Jr. Definitely going to be one of those like trivia questions or like an immaculate grid like answer.
Yeah, like
An
when
immaculate
you and
grid? What is
James
that?
tried to name all the Pistons
Oh,
last year.
I was so bad at that. Oh my god,
But
that
there were
was so
like 40
embarrassing.
of them.
35, whatever
Yeah,
it was.
but
Yeah, they set a
still, like,
record.
like not remembering like Shake Milton. Like, come on, like I was better.
Danilo
Than that.
Gallinari, Jared Roden,
Mike Muscala.
Mike
Is it-
Muscala. Oh,
Wait,
did he request
Wes,
a
you never
trade or
done
something?
Immaculate Grid? You never done
No, what is
it's
this?
like the 3x3 with like the different teams, and it's like, you need to enter a guy who's played for both teams.
You'd enjoy this, Wes.
This sounds like a word game, though. I hate word
No,
games.
I mean it resembles like a crossword, but it's not.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I still don't understand.
It's like a diagram, and like what the x-axis will be Pistons, and the
I'm gonna
y
derail
will
the
be
pod. And I'm gonna show
no,
you.
no. I'm
You're good.
I'm
You're
doing
good. You're
it.
good.
And the other side will be like T-Wolves, and then you'll put Wendell Moore. We'll send that. To you
Okay.
too.
Yeah, send it to me. I'll give it a go. That it sounds. I think I'd be terrible at it, but maybe I'd like it. Well, all right. Looking forward, getting back on track, back on the rails. Looking forward the rest of this year. Do we think that adding a player like Dennis Schroeder is going to significantly help the Pistons play-in push or playoff push? Because I don't think there's any argument that you could make that like this really hurts the Pistons in the standings or anything like that. So like to what extent have the Pistons improved this roster, and does this really change our expectations now moving on down the stretch of the year?
I don't think my expectations have changed. My expectations have kind of already been blown out of the water by the way that they've played this season. And so I think like with the readjustment, I think now that there's a better chance that they're able to like stave off a play-in berth. There's a better chance they're able to hold the 6th seed, but I still think that's unlikely, and that's not necessarily because of anything wrong with Dennis Schroeder or like wrong with the Pistons. I just think like in particular, Orlando is capable of playing better than they have over their last like 15 games. And so I think that there's a good shot that the Pistons just get overtaken, right? Not because they're playing poorly or anything, but just that, other teams are playing better. But with or without this trade, the Pistons should still be better than like Atlanta, who I think got worse at the deadline, and Chicago, who definitely got worse.
They're just chilling.
Yeah. I mean, they probably
did we see that their GM just said that they're happy? Like, yeah, we're good with where we're at. And like you look over the past 5 years of their team. What are they? Why is Vooch there? Why?
Oh my god.
Why did they get their own pick back and then keep Vooch? Why? Sorry, keep going.
No, you're good. You're good. I really like this is going to be the team you have to care about a lot more in like 4 months. So I understand. But yeah, and like Philly is coming up on them. But like I think Philly is really susceptible to like any sort of Embiid re-injury. And so I don't know how much stock to put in them either, honestly. And so I think there's a really good shot that the Pistons stay in like that 7-8 range. But Schroeder makes it easier for them to hold on to or to climb to like a 6th seed.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think it would be awesome if they stuck in that 7-8 range and just had to win one game to get to a playoff series, as opposed to like being in that 9-10 and having to fight your way against 2 teams. Like, so I would be happy with that. And yeah, I'm totally with you. I think they can still make a push for to not be in the play-in and be in the playoffs out of the gate. Like another thing Trajan said today was like they got a little bit better. It wasn't the time to get a lot better, which I think is a good way to put it. And it just like, I think if the roster stuck where it was in trying to have Sasser like bite off a bit more than he can chew for the rest of the season, and try to hold up and stay afloat. Because just the second unit with Sasser running it, and in all fairness to him, like I don't think that's the type of player he is. So it's no knock on him, but just offense was so hard to come by because they just didn't really have any creators on the floor at times. So I think bringing a guy like Schroeder in, who has experience on a bunch of different playoff teams, has had a good international basketball career as well. Like, and just the type of player he is, can shoot the ball a little bit, like can go through ups and downs. And we've seen that this year. I think it's definitely a move that positions you to make that push, whatever it might be. Like, just hope for the best, and whatever it is, it is. So yeah, and just the fact that you didn't give out any of your future assets really is like,
you brought some stuff in.
Yeah, it's just like a win-win to me. Like, it's a good way to just buy some time until Jaden Ivey comes back, or if there's a different long-term solution.
Yeah, and YouTube users right to bring up Miami too. So, I mean, they're certainly better now with Andrew Wiggins than with Jimmy Butler just not playing any basketball at all for them. I want to leave this as an open question to both of you guys. Who's the 10th best team in the East?
Not the Charlotte Hornets.
No, I mean, not the Wizards, right?
Probably Philly.
I mean, is like Toronto the other one in that conversation now, that like whatever it is that they're doing, like,
right.
I don't know.
And so, like, okay, so we've talked about the Heat, right? The Pistons are sitting at 7 right now. We've talked about the Magic being a team that can step up. The Hawks right now are 9th, but they got worse. The Bulls got worse. We've been bringing up the 76ers as a team that maybe pushes in. So that's 9 teams, right? Heat, Pistons, Magic, Sixers. It's just really bad after that. That's my only point. Like, at this point, it would be an incredible disappointment if Detroit does not make the play-in tournament, right? Yeah. Because like, you'd be talking, I don't have any wood by me, so I'm not going to say it, a significant injury to the Detroit Pistons roster that they could not come back from in order to knock them out of that space. It has to be play-in. At this point, it's play-in or bust. I think, truthfully, we probably should set sights a little bit higher. Stay at 500 would be a good goal from my perspective, because just looking at the standings, you know, the Hawks are going to keep falling. They're already 5 games under 500. The Bulls going to keep falling. They're 8 games under 500. The Raptors are maybe a threat right now to make it as the 10th seed, and they're 16-35. Like, this is a really bad Eastern Conference.
Yeah, 35 games should assure you a play-in spot, and the Pistons, so that means they only need like 9 more wins, 10 more wins, in like 30 more games. It's like they should be fine. But like you said, Wes, the goal should be worst case scenario to host a home play-in game, right? Like, you lose the 7-8 game, you still get to host the 9-10 winner. It's like, so that the goal should be like, at least you get that game, as opposed to falling to the 9-10 and having to win 2 road games in order to make it into the playoffs.
Yeah, I like that, like aiming for the top 8, because who knows how the rest of the regular season is going to play out with like the top 6 specifically. And I mean, I think also if they do win a play-in game and get to a playoff series, like, that makes the Pistons convey that first round pick this year, and then that opens up whatever other doors you have for deals when you can deal your own picks too. Like, we saw a bunch of first round picks getting flying around, and that's what it's taking, like at least one for some of those bigger moves. And like, the Pistons can do that potentially next year if the right thing is on the table.
All right, let's get into a couple of questions here that we had submitted. This one's actually a comment, but this is fantastic because YouTube user got me on this last week, right? So YouTube user, our guy, thank you again for all the comments, participation in the chat right now. But he says that he hears Dennis Schroeder as a side hustle as a chiropractor because he's going to fix Cade Cunningham's back problems from carrying the team for so dang long. And yes, hopefully he can. That would be fantastic. His question, though, was this. This is about the Brandon Ingram trade. So, Brandon Ingram trade. It says, with the relatively low cost that BI went for, would you have paid that price knowing he wants more than he's potentially worth this offseason. So the package that the Raptors sent out to get Brandon Ingram, would you have wanted to send something similar to get him into Detroit?
I don't think so. Well, so Ingram went for Bruce Brown, Kelly Olynyk, a first-round pick in 2 seconds, or just 1 second?
One second.
So that's 2 expirings and a first-round pick, and a second-round pick. I believe that first is Indiana's first this year, so like not a particularly amazing first
top 4 protected, which it'll be like whatever India. Yeah, it's like not a great amazing first.
Yeah. The Pistons, again, because they still have their first in limbo, I don't know like how many firsts they were allowed to trade. So basically it's like, would you have given up like THJ and something else that's expiring and a first round pick for Ingram? And like, I don't think so. Like Toronto's kind of taking a gamble on this because Ingram will be a free agent this offseason. So again, like if you really think you want him or you really think you can get him, you can pursue him that way in the offseason. He's hurt right now. I don't think he's played the last couple of games. And so and like the chemistry that this team has right now is too good. And I really don't want to mess with things too much. So I don't think I would have paid even the low price that Ingram got in a trade this year. I was more like, can we get Bruce Brown?
Yeah, for sure. I'm with you. And I think it's just because of the unknown of like, is Brandon Ingram going to sign an extension? Like, and do you want to commit to that? I don't think that's where the team really is right now. And I mean, Cade's extension is going to kick in and you have to make a move at some point. But like, what's it going to be? It just seems like now wasn't the time after what Trajan said and like the moves that they made. But yeah, you can keep those doors open. And just because like the Pistons didn't have a first to deal this year, I feel like their hands were kind of tied like with the moves that they made. And I think that they did a great job with those moves. But like, I wasn't expecting Dalton Connect to get traded at the trade deadline. So like, I think for teams that have limited assets, the Pistons might have had like other teams were probably asking about Ron Holland if the Pistons are trying to acquire like a big piece. And like, I'm not giving Ron Holland up right now.
Well, I mean, like to do the other hypothetical, right? Like, would you have traded Jalen Duren for the Mark Williams package? That was what, Connect in 2 firsts, a first and a swap.
Yeah, they're 2031 first, unprotected, and a swap. Yeah, I think I would have, but like, I think it's clear that Langdon didn't want to shake things up, and I think that would have shaken things up.
Yeah,
I mean,
definitely.
Maybe there's more thought to like farther out, like what are you gonna do with Duren this summer? But I think right now it's just like this team is overachieving. Let's see how much they can overachieve. But yeah, when I saw what Mark Williams got, I was like, that's a pretty nice deal for the Hornets. And I get why the Lakers did it too.
Yeah, that would have been an easy, quick yes for me. Would have ran that in. It would have sprinted that one in. Look, I know that Jalen Duren's been playing well, right? I don't think that he's been playing so well that you're thinking about handing him a massive extension or anything at this point, right? So then if you're telling me that I could get 2 first-round picks, it doesn't even matter the quality of those first-round picks, but you could get 2 first-round picks plus a guy that was a borderline lottery pick this year who, he's older, so you're thinking probably just a bench shooter, but more floor spacing, right? Nothing wrong with that. Maybe that's
a THJ replacement, right?
Yeah, or a THJ replacement. Like that's just that would have been way more than I thought Jalen Duren was worth in the trade market. So I would have thought that would be a home run. Now we don't know that was offered, right? But I would have done that if it were.
Yeah, I saw some tweets that said the Lakers were like, as they were canvassing the league for bigs after the Luka trade, like Duren was one of the guys that they called about.
Yeah.
I don't know how far they got. Like, I don't know what was on the table. Like, but
Yeah.
I had to do a double take at that tweet because it was rim protection and Jalen Duren in the same tweet. It's like, what is going on in LA?
He had a really nice block in that Cleveland game.
He did. Every now and then he'll get one of these like weak side, rotate under the hoop and swat it into the first row. And it's like, those look good. The rest still not really, but like those look good.
Yeah.
I'd love to know if the Lakers had like Duren in a higher like regard than Mark Williams. Like if they called about Duren before and then went to Mark Williams, because like Mark Williams isn't necessarily a great defender either, and he's had much more injury problems than Jalen Duren has. So like, are you okay with that just in terms of like the availability that Duren has? And Williams has come back and has been like okay, other than his like, I think it was a back injury or whatever it is. But yeah, I would love to know like what the Lakers would have given up. If I was Trajan, I would have asked about Austin Reeves if that was a possibility, but Lakers probably didn't want to give him up. But I didn't think they wanted to give up Connect either. So who knows?
Yeah. And I don't know. I think kind of like what you said with the health issues and then Williams not being an incredible defender either. I think they're kind of interchangeable, them being Duren and Mark Williams, because the activity level that Mark Williams plays with is quite a bit better, in my opinion, than Duren's. But of course, Duren's durability has been a lot better over the course of his career. So you kind of weigh those off. I don't know. I wouldn't think there's too much of a difference between the two, but maybe the Lakers did. This was kind of an interesting, maybe sad question. This is from No Frown Motown. It says, who was more responsible for last season's debacle, Monty Williams or Troy Weaver? And it is fairly stark given that the core young players are still essentially the same this year. So who do we blame? No Frown Motown wants a finger point to point at. So who?
Yeah. Can I say both? No, I think given what I've seen this year, it really seems like you have to lay a lot more blame than I would have originally thought at the feet of Troy Weaver, because like the simple tweaks to the roster that people have been begging for have made them competent in a way that I undervalued, or I underplayed like coming into this season. Tim Hardaway Jr. and Malik Beasley were like no one's idea of like saviors this coming into the season, but you see how effective Cade is with like moderate amounts of spacing, and you're like, oh, it's like, why did it take Troy Weaver so long to try and assemble something like this? Why did he never try anything like this? So yeah, I think you have to lay a lot of the blame at Troy Weaver's feet.
Yeah, my answer is Troy too, but I just think it was the perfect storm of everything being so bad. But like, to me, it's just Troy because it starts with how that roster was built, and it wasn't like I feel like it's anyone that was watching that team play basketball could have seen what they needed, and maybe Troy Weaver believed in Isaiah Livers too much and whatever it might be. But then just the Monty Williams thing, I just felt like it was the perfect storm of, you have this coach who maybe wanted to take a year off, like maybe wanted to be there, maybe didn't. And then he didn't believe in your second year point guard. That was an obvious move. Like, just so many things went wrong that it all just culminated into what happened. But I think it started with like what that roster was. And I just think everything was so bad that like there needs to be like a book on actually what happened one day. Like if Omari or James or like one of the players wants to write it, I don't care. But like, we need to know what was going on behind those walls one day, because it's just crazy.
Yeah, I stand by with what Blake, you and I were talking about over the offseason. I just think the roster was so bad in ways that made so little sense that Look, I know that the narrative coming out of the team was that, we're going to make a step, right? We're going to get better. We're going to be competitive this year. But the roster just didn't look like it could really do that. And I seriously think Monty Williams, I kind of feel bad for him. He just kept throwing stuff at the wall and literally nothing stuck. Like the Killian Hayes starting thing. What was that? Why did they do that? Right? But were there really many other options? You could have stuck Jaden Ivey out there, sure. But other than that, like, you still had Thompson, Stewart, and Duran starting next to that. Like, what else was to be done? It was a miracle when we had 3 games of Mike Muscala who could shoot as a big, and that was a game changer until even he said, "I just want to leave." Right? Like, that roster was bad in ways that is just difficult to put into words. So I blame it on Troy Weaver. I don't know if they'd be as good this year if they still had Monty Williams. Probably not. Right? JB's been really good. I think he's been fantastic and situationally in ways that Monty Williams really wasn't last season. But yeah, it's Troy Weaver for me, 100%.
Yeah. I mean, using your cap space to like take on the ghost of Joe Harris, I feel like it's just so like, that's just, and I don't know like what the team was like, but Trajan has talked about his like cap guys that he's brought in and everything. And I feel like they've just prioritized, if you're taking guys on in a salary dump, like Wendell Moore was, and he gave the Pistons a few good games, like just get guys that are serviceable in some way and not like Joe Harris sitting on your bench doing nothing for $20 million.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
like
you
had, sorry, go ahead.
A YouTube user does bring up a good point, right? That like
true.
Monty wasn't Troy's choice, and he was kind of the choice of Gore's. So it's like, okay, like sure, I guess. But like, I guess the question is like, do you think, as Wes said, like, do you think Monty Williams would have found as much success with this team, with this roster? And I still feel like the answer is no, right?
Yeah,
I still feel like there's I still feel like the regression we saw from the bigs on defense, and just like, if Killian Hayes was gone, like would Monty start like Ron Holland? Like what would he be doing with Jaden Ivey? Like, so yeah.
That's a good point. I think just like maybe it was like the change of scene or the change of regime for these guys too, like JB coming in, and it just seems like the vets that have come in have really helped out the locker room, and like JB is obviously a big part of that too. And I don't know, like I was all for the Monty Williams hire when it happened, and like I still will never understand like how it went as bad as it did, but like it's like he definitely wasn't the guy for the job. So it's just wild how it all played out.
Yeah, like going to as many games as I've been to this year, you can really see the impact that like Malik Beasley in particular like has on like the young guys.
Yeah,
it's like I know he's like not like old yet, but like his influence, like getting the guys up when like they need to be like pumped up a little bit, calming them down when like there's like high pressure, high leverage situations. Ugh, that was harder than I thought it would be to say. You can see his fingerprints like all over this team. And him coming to Trajan and being like, please don't trade me before the trade deadline. It's like, hopefully they're able to work out something contract wise this offseason, because he really has had like a major impact on this team.
Yeah. And he's still only like 26, 27 years old. Like it's just like the perfect piece that hopefully you can keep long term. I think the one issue is like money talks, and like who knows what he's gonna like get thrown. But yeah, the Pistons have to do whatever they can to keep him around, and maybe from what Trajan said, like Malik will do something to give them a break so he can stick around.
Let's keep on that presser really quick here just to kind of close out the show, because that quote right from Langdon about Malik Beasley, basically begging him not to trade him, wants to stay in Detroit, which was also one of my major takeaways from that presser. Fantastic news. Good. Keep Malik Beasley. What were some other things that really stood out to you guys? So we've talked a little bit about that offhand comment about Schroeder's role. We've now Malik Beasley. What else? What else was really interesting to you guys about that press conference?
The part where he mentioned the that his expectations were like in line with, I think, what like our expectations were coming into the season, but that their performance so far this season has caused them to like readjust, but not like wildly out of balance. So like knowing that the GM is on the same page as everybody else, and that there's no like big desire is like. He didn't sit down and be like, oh man, like I'm so mad we missed out on like all these like big names that got traded at the deadline. It's like, oh man, we didn't get De'Aaron Fox. I'm so mad. It's just like, no, like we know what we have here. Like you can see on the court that what we have here is even greater than I thought it was going to be coming into the season. And so we're going to keep it going. To me, that was the biggest deal. Is that like, okay, Trajan sees what I see, right? Is that this team is better than we expected, but still not quite as ready as we'd like them to be. But there's, this is year one. There's no need to do anything crazy.
Yeah.
Extreme, I should say.
Yeah. I was surprised. Well, definitely joking, but that Trajan said he was sleeping when the Luka trade went down. I'm like, how? And Laz, you tweeted a picture of him like working trades at the game the day before the trade deadline. I'm like, shout out to him for getting sleep, because that was like a crazy night. But seriously, like related to the Pistons, I think like what I mentioned a bit earlier, just about how Trajan said specifically, like it wasn't the Pistons' time to get a lot better. And I feel like it's easy to fall in the hole of like, oh, all these guys are available and they're going for small price tags that the Pistons could afford to give up. I just think it's and since this new front office has come in, I haven't gotten any idea that they're not like thinking about the bigger picture or anything, but it's nice to hear that they're staying the course and aren't going to be reactionary just because you're a game under 500 at the trade deadline and sitting in position to make the playoffs. So I was definitely happy to hear that as well. And also just in terms of like how they talked through the moves they made, like every move that they made kept flexibility on the books. So like you're not committed and can potentially like set yourself up for that big move when it is time to make that big move. So yeah, I'm with you, Laz. It was just nice to hear the thought process, but behind like the moves they made, and just like understanding that this is where we see the team is at, and that's how the front office sees it too, which honestly might have been different a year ago.
Almost certainly was different a year ago. I think we could say that definitively.
Yeah.
On that same topic, because that kind of comment also stuck out to me. It had me wondering if, did the timeline shift at all, do we think, for Trajan Langdon and his evaluation of this roster? Because obviously we didn't see a major move right by the Pistons this trade deadline. Schroeder helps on the margins, and it was a good addition. I think we all agree on that. But it wasn't a big swing by any means. They actually didn't give up any single player that was previously on the roster, which is a pretty incredible feat, actually. Genius maneuvering there by Trajan Langdon. It was a fun little footnote. But, do we think maybe that it's moved up to, say, the offseason? Because I know, Blake, you and I have talked about before the season really started, we figured maybe the timeline was looking at next year's trade deadline, right? You'd have one full season. You'd then have an off season where you could kind of make some tinkering moves and then see where you're at that following February if you want to make a big swing or kind of like slightly blow it up, and you'll know more about these young players by then, right? But has that maybe shifted up at all, just with how surprised the GM has been about the roster's capability so far this year?
I think it probably has a little. My like inflection point was always the extensions, or the possible extensions for Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren, like in the same offseason. And so I feel a lot better about handing Ivy an extension than I did 6 months ago. I'm still questioning a lot of what exactly Jalen Duren's value is not to this Pistons team, but financially and like on the open market, right? If Mark Williams is worth 2 first-round picks or a first-round pick and a swap and a lottery guy, is like would Jalen Duren command like $30 million a year on the open market? And if that's the case, like, would you be interested in paying that? Would you be interested in paying that as the Pistons, knowing that like Cade like Luka really likes a lob threat. Him and Cade and Duren have really good chemistry, and so you like, is that worth preserving, or do you feel like you could find a better, more solid defensively option out in the open market for cheaper, right? But perhaps without the upside of Jalen Duren, right? Like we talk a lot about Jalen Duren's defense, but offensively, like he had a really nice stretch of games that ceased, I think, against Cleveland. But like in the last like 2 weeks or so, he's had like a really, really nice run of games. Been crashing the offensive glass. And so like he's still like, he just turned 21. Like there's still a lot of untapped there. And so it was like, what do you do with that? Knowing that you I think now you give Ivy, what I would do if I were Trajan, you give Ivy a contract, you don't give Duren a contract. Giving Ivy the contract probably means you need to do whatever big move you're going to do like now, because then it'll be a Cade, big move, Ivy, that's your core, and then you get pieces kind of around that core. And once Cade's extension kicks in and Ivy's extension kicks in, like you're kind of set, right? Unless you could let go of one of those guys, which is a whole nother conversation, right?
Yeah, I think like what the Lakers did kind of really like messed with whatever Jalen Duren's value is, because like the Lakers are kind of pigeonholed into paying Mark Williams because they don't have any assets to get another center. And then, yeah, like you mentioned, Laz, it's a great point. Like Mark Williams is going to be a great lob threat for Luka, just like Duren is for Cade. And I mean, Luka Duren lobs would have sold a ton of tickets in LA if the Pistons were interested in that package. But yeah, it's like I'm almost wondering if the Pistons still have a high second round pick. Like I'm wondering if you don't give Duren an extension, like YouTube user mentions, he's going to be an RFA unless someone offers a similar trade package. Do you use that pick at the top of the second round to try and get a big who might take a little bit of time, that can sit behind Duren and Stu and be more of like a defensive anchor?
Like you know better than me, Blake, though. Like, is there that kind of guy like in this year's draft?
Bryce has said it too, and like there's a few centers at like the top in the lottery, but we're not expecting the Pistons to pick there. Like I think there are more guys that you can at least take a shot on in the second round. So like maybe that's what they do, or maybe they do it through free agency for a smaller like prove it deal kind of guy. But yeah, then if you take Duren into restricted free agency, like you have to make that decision at some point too. So yeah, it's a tough one, honestly. And I think like in terms of the timeline, I think Duren and Ivy, like what you're going to do there is first priority. Then Malik Beasley, like how are you going to keep him around? Like figure out all those things. I'd be interested to know, like, if the Pistons don't have their draft pick, like when do their future picks, like when can you trade them? Because I feel like that might play a little bit into like, do you make an off-season deal, or do you like do what you can in free agency and then see where you're at the deadline, like you mentioned, Wes. But yeah, I think with Cade's extension kicking in next year, like the clock is kind of going to like make the move that you're going to have to move sometime within the next year, which is like kind of a cop-out answer, honestly, but I feel like that's where they're at.
I'm in the same spot as you guys. I think everything does kind of hinge, like you said, Les, on those two contracts. What you're going to do with Ivy, what you're going to do with Duren. Ivy's. I'm a little nervous about that one now because I wonder if he might want to take like a gamble on himself at this point, coming off the injury. Right? Do the Pistons try to get him on a bit of a discount, and then he goes, "No, I'll just wait." I would not love taking Jaden Ivey into restricted free agency. The thing with Duren is. I think to me, it still is always going to come down to defense versus whatever potential you believe he has as a passer. Because I still remember Cade Cunningham throwing no-look lobs to James Wiseman. And look, when you got guys that are that talented as pick-and-roll ball handlers and passers like Luka, and then lesser but similar like Cade or Trae Young, give them an athletic big and they'll throw some really fancy-looking lobs, and it's going to be really great. So the lob chemistry to me is I maybe underrate that. Maybe I'm wrong for that, but I tend to. But I will say that I do think that the passing upside that has been theoretically there with Duren has showed up more often past couple of weeks. He had one really nice little shovel pass to Sar Thompson on a cut. Actually, that might have been the Cavs game, even when he was having an otherwise poor night. And so that's been good to see. I think you guys are right that he has kind of picked it up a little bit over the past few weeks, which is, again, really good to see.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like the deadline just made it so, like Wes, we were talking about, if you're going to see any surprise move, like it might be that Duren was sent in some deal. And like, even though that didn't happen, just from the reports we've seen, like that might have been the closest surprise, but that's not where Trajan saw this team. So I think that was a vote of confidence for Duren, at least in terms of like, we think you have some sort of role here and we want to see like how it plays out for a little bit longer. So yeah, I'm interested to see that one, but because I think the clock starts like this off season in terms of like whenever that big move, whatever the big move is, like we'll see, but I think it starts at that point.
All right, one last question, and then I have kind of a fun one for us to end on. So this was YouTube user mentioning that quote from Trajan Langdon that we were just talking about previously. Was Langdon being honest about the team and giving them credit for overachieving refreshing to you as a fan, assumedly, especially because of how the previous 4-ish years had gone?
Yeah, definitely. Just the, not the lack of
self-awareness.
It's like he wasn't trying to like obstruct like what was actually happening, right? It wasn't a scenario when it's like, okay, we can see that this team is good, but we can also, I guess it's easier to be honest if you're like, hey, like this team, this team is better than I thought. That's easier to say than like, oh, this team is much worse than we were planning on being, which is obviously the scenario that we were in last year. So yeah, that's very refreshing. What's refreshing is that, to me personally, is that like I think along the same lines. It's like it's good to know that like I'm thinking the same as the GM, right? I mean, maybe the GM knows more than I do, or like has more information than I do, but we both kind of see the same thing. Like that part's nice.
Yeah. I feel the same. I mean, honestly, like I'm not tapped into all the other GMs like post deadline pressers other than Nico Harrison and Rob Pelinka, but I feel like it's rare to hear the leader of your front office say like, I wasn't expecting this team to like do what they did. And I think Trajan might be a little of a unique situation, whereas like he made some good signings and brought in some veterans, but he didn't shake up anything with the quote unquote core. So it's like not guys that he brought in that are doing this, but it all seems to be guys that he believes in, and he hasn't like made any drastic moves other than moves around the edges to like help complement your core and just help like field a competent basketball team, honestly. So I think just hearing him like think along the lines of like how people who pay attention to this team are thinking, like you said, Laz, is definitely refreshing because I mean, Monty Williams would say one thing and do the other, and then Troy Weaver like wouldn't give us much in press conferences either. So I enjoy listening to him speak, Trajan, whenever he is available to the media.
And I think maybe the most reassuring part of that quote from him was just the fact that he also had reasonable expectations to start the year, right? Especially going back to the previous offseason where you looked at the roster and you heard the words coming out of the team and you thought that just did not make all that much sense. Now it was clearly like, okay, lower expectations. Let's see what this young squad can do. It was kind of just open-ended. And now they've exceeded that, which is fantastic. But the fact that it started low is, I think, a really, really good and refreshing thing. Okay, here's what I wanted to ask you guys before we close out the show. That Luka Doncic trade was obviously insane. So I want just general thoughts on that whole move, because I'm sure you both have them. But then also, what were you doing when it happened? So Trajan Langdon was sleeping. What about you guys?
So I was watching Star Trek. And then I switched to YouTube.
Which Star Trek?
Right now I'm on Voyager. I'm on season 2.
Voyager, nice. Okay.
Yeah. And so the way I found out was there's a YouTube user named Maximilian, and he does like highlight clips. And so like on the front page it was like, "Welcome to the Lakers, Luka," with like Luka's highlights, and I was like, "What?" So
wait, how quickly did he have that up after the trade?
It's like, so then I rush over to Twitter and I see, and it's like, huh? What? So that's how I found out.
Oh my gosh. So I actually like I just didn't have I think my phone was on do not disturb. So like my Twitter notifications weren't coming through, but I checked my messages, and I have a group chat with this like some of my friends who I do a dynasty fantasy basketball league with, and we just throw basketball takes into the void there. And someone texted that and just said "holy" in all caps. So I was like, "Oh God, what did the Pistons do?" So I go to Twitter, I see the trade, I like can't believe it. And I know I've mentioned it on the pod before, but I've been doing some writing for Sports Illustrated, just like general breaking news stuff. So I like popped into our Slack. It's going off, like people are signed off for the night, but people are coming back in. And then a bunch of us were just like, oh my God, like I ended up working for a couple hours because I would have just been doom scrolling like Twitter anyways. So wrote a couple of quick stories about it. Was a work from like 12:30, I think, till like 2. And it's great. Like, it's the most shocking trade in NBA history. Like, it's one of those where you remember where you were when it happened. I still can't believe it's real.
I was at a euchre tournament with my
gosh.
father-in-law, my dad, and then another just kind of family friend. And I had such shock and confusion on my face that my father-in-law actually like sincerely asked, "What's wrong? What happened? Is everything okay?" Like, no, just Luka Doncic got traded. That's all.
Did you win? Did you guys win?
That one I did. Yes. That game I won. I did not win in the tournament, but that game I won. So that was good. Maybe I needed more like big NBA trades, and that was my good luck charm.
There you go.
Because it was a big comeback in euchre. Hopefully you all know how to play euchre.
Oh yeah.
We're all Midwesterners. Yeah, we know euchre.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't get to play as much as I want to, but love it. And also, before we sign off, we also have to shout out Cade Cunningham for being in the 3-point contest.
Yeah, we didn't even get to that.
Yeah, that one was shocking to me, by the way, but I hope he wins it. So yeah, I mean, hey, the league wants Cade to be out there, which I think is a great thing. Good.
Yeah, that is the thing I've noticed more. Like, my friend group has been like, have you noticed the league like pushing Cade more? And it's like, yeah, like you guys, like he was the #1 overall pick. Like, it's good for them if he's good and the team is good. So like you shouldn't be surprised. But I guess we're so used to being bad, and B, we're so used to kind of Detroit versus everybody. That's like, all this national attention is not something we're very used to. But like, yeah, like they play in Atlanta. He's in the TNT studios. He's chopping it up with like Shaq and Candace. Like, yeah, like that's good. Like, so yeah, I'm also encouraged by I'm encouraged by the fact he wants to do like the 3-point contest, right? Like, there you can definitely see a case where like he's like, oh no, like give it to Malik or whatever. But it's like, no, like put him out in front. Like let him be the face of the franchise that we know he can be.
I think he's got a shot. His shot does not have much dip to it, which generally goes well for those 3-point shootouts when you got the rack right there. So I think he might be able to pull it off. Well, at least be competitive. I don't think he'll win it, but it shouldn't be embarrassing like that one time Andre Drummond was in the dunk contest.
Yeah.
That was bad. That was really bad.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Laz, thank you for staying. We went a little extra long today, but we appreciate you. Why don't you let everybody know where they can find all your stuff, and then we'll close it out.
No, I thank you, Wes, and thank you, Blake, both again for having me. I really appreciate it. Of course, you can follow me on X at the little thing right there. You can also follow me on Blue Sky. I waver back and forth between the two. And for the trade deadline, like in particular, like X just has the infrastructure, right, to deal with that scenario a little bit better than Blue Sky does. That's kind of also what I was picturing YouTube user. But you can always find anything I do on Detroit Bad Boys at DetroitBadBoys.com, which is the same place that you found this podcast probably. And so yeah, that's what I've been up to.
Yeah. Shout out to you, Les. Thanks for coming on. We'll have to have you on again soon as we get into this postseason run or whatever it will be. And you got a basketball game to get to because the Pistons are playing the Sixers in about an hour and a half on ESPN, nationally televised. So
yeah, I'm excited. We should. I think they should win tonight. So we'll see.
Hopefully they don't lose on a buzzer beater or game winner. That's what I'm hoping. But
it just seems unlikely, Blake.
Yeah, especially. I mean, they didn't like lose anyone at the trade deadline, which I'm encouraged by. Like, it's not you're fielding a weird team together while everyone goes through physicals. But yeah, so hopefully the Pistons can get back to 500 tonight, Friday night here. And shout out to everyone who joined us in the chat live, whether you're listening to the recording wherever you listen to your podcast. A reminder that you can always call our phone line to ask a question and hear your voice on the show. The number for that is 313-355-2717. And special thanks to our guy Sean Korp, the managing editor of Detroit Bad Boys, for supporting the show. Shout out to you guys for all the questions and talking points tonight. We'll catch you next week, whether on your commute or live with us on YouTube. We can't wait to talk more Detroit basketball with you all.